Mm. Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Hello.
Mrs. Maida, you know your camera's off? Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
I'm like looking at my picture. I'm like, my head is looking a little shiny today. I need to turn the light down in this place.
Yeah, we've been meaning to talk to you about that.
You need a little powder.
Yeah, they make stuff for that.
Mr. McCoy, are we ready?
Good evening, Madam President. It's 6 o'clock and I've started the recording.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Levenstein.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence in support of our friends and family who are affected by multiple pandemics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Levenstein. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Here.
Dr. Henderson,
Here.
Mr. Howard, Mr. Levenstein,
Here.
Ms. Maida,
Here.
Ms. Mineo,
Here.
Ms. Santiago,
Here.
Mr. Stridiron, Mr. Walker.
Here.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matter made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, the review of programs and placements of students with disabilities, collective bargaining under the Taylor Law, NTA, NASA, and CSEA, the proposed acquisition and sale of property, and discussion regarding current litigation, DS versus NECSD et al., and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
We'll return in a while. Thank you, everyone. Mr. McCoy, let me know when we're back.
You're all set, Madam President.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everybody's safe and well. I'm going to turn the meeting over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. We hope that you are well. This evening, I have several items, but I want to start with one of the most important, and that is 2.1. all across New York State over the past week was an opportunity that I hope many districts recognize their Board of Ed members. And so tonight we'd like to do the same. The truth of the matter is this recognition really should be a year-round endeavor, but as NYSBA has indicated, designating 1 week to highlight these volunteers' efforts ensures they receive some of the thanks they are absolutely worthy of and deserve. So as I've asked our employees across the district, please join me in recognizing our fantastic board trustees who work so hard, who are committed, and strive every day to lead with the best governance so that way our scholars and our educators truly can excel. Mr. McCoy, can we go ahead and click the video, please?
When I rise up, let me when I rise up, let me rise up, rise up, let me rise up, like a bird, let me fall without regret, let me fall like a like a leaf. When I rise up, when I rise up, let me rise up, rise up, let me rise up, like a fall, let me fall without regret, like a leaf, like a leaf, like a leaf.
Okay, again, thank you, board trustees. Thank you, Madrigals. Thank you to our student artists who developed the cards that went out to the board members. And as one of the messages indicated, your efforts, your commitment, your dedication does not go unnoticed. So thank you. I'm going to move some things around here, Madam President, just because we do have a presentation of someone who is waiting. So Mr. McCoy, I'm going to move to 2.3 and allow for Mr. Hart to present. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we had a transportation advisory team that met over 2 years to study and make recommendations to see if there are ways we can make our transportation system more efficient and cost effective. Part of that work entailed by board resolution, hiring external consultant who has great experience in this particular area. And so tonight is an opportunity for Mr. Hart to share with the board and the public the results of his study. Mr. Hart.
Great. Dr. Padilla, Madam President, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and the members of the board this evening. I appreciate the opportunity of having worked with Dr. Padilla and staff over the last several months and putting all of this together. It's been a challenging process, obviously, with everything that's been going on and the challenges that you are facing day to day. But I think we ended up with a very high quality result, which I hope to convey to you this evening in the sense of what the opportunities are, primarily from the perspective of adjusting bell times to make the system work more efficiently and effectively for the Newburgh schools. Mr. McCoy, can I share my screen now? Is that?
Yes, you can, sir.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. I see you and Mr. Hart, so I ended up calling one of you. So
go ahead and put that up. And let's see. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing the presentation at this point. And with your permission, I will move through this. I tried to keep this
You can't see it, sir.
You cannot. Okay. I think oh, wait a minute. Forgot to press the button. There we go. How's that?
Yep, we're good.
All right, terrific. I'm going to try and move through this as quickly as possible and try and keep it as short as possible, but there's a lot of subject matter to cover. So what I will do is touch on every slide and hopefully pause and spend a little bit more time on the more impactful points to be made throughout the presentation. And then at the end, hopefully leave plenty of time to address any questions that you all may have. So my name is Tom Platt. I was the project manager and I'm co-owner of Decision Support Group. Just by means of background, this is work that I have been involved with working in the pupil transportation industry for the last 20 plus years, almost all of it within the realm of providing advisory services to school districts and other education agencies. So we come at this with a broad base of experience, but I want to assure you that every job that we do, every project we undertake, we focus on the needs and the particular circumstances and requirements of the district that we are working with. So to that end, the objectives for this project, I've boiled them down to their essence here. Ultimately, we were hired to develop a set of bell time alternatives for the Newburgh schools that would support efficient and effective tiered routing. As I will get into when we go into the presentation in a little bit more depth, there is nothing that's more impactful in terms of your ability to operate an efficient transportation system than your bell times. So the subject matter is appropriate and timely. Within that, the goal is to optimize on-time delivery to all schools, and we'll talk a little bit about the challenges in that regard as well. To begin, we start all of these projects with developing a performance baseline, because we always have to understand what the basis of comparison is for the system and what the opportunities might be going forward. So I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly. This first slide talks about the services that are provided in terms of volume and the type of services. What I want you to take away from this is, first and foremost, this is a sizable pupil transportation system with 913 or thereabouts daily bus trips. And by a bus trip, what I mean is a load of students beginning with the bus empty and delivering those students to a location. It's a combination of morning and afternoon, as well as after school services, and it encompasses all aspects of the services that are provided. What I would ask you to take away from this slide is the comparison between the number of students transported and the number of trips used to transport each category of students. While far and away, most of the students that we are transporting are to regular education in district schools, when you look at how many bus trips are used to transport those kids versus the other types of programs that you have, you can see or begin to see what some of the challenges are when we start talking about changes to the system going forward. Here we talk a little bit about the service indicators, and here are some of the key takeaways that I want you to have from this slide. You have a heavy after-school component in your service. This adds significantly to the overall demand on the system, and it throws the AM and the PM demand and requirements somewhat out of balance, which has a significant impact on what bell times that we are able to consider. McKinney-Vento and foster care services, they represent a steadily increasing and a very, very costly component of your service. Even though there's not a lot of students involved, we are using ever more buses to transport those students, and it's generally low demand, low incidence, low density type service ends up being very costly. Your non-public component is also a significant aspect of your overall service. And what's significant here is understanding that as we think about bell time alternatives for the Newburgh schools, we may or may not be able to make some of those changes work with the non-public component of the service. And finally, your special needs requirements are split between in-district placements and out-of-district placements, and also have a very significant impact on total cost, as well as the impact of bell time changes going forward. So drilling down, and if we focus on just the Newburgh component of the service, and what I mean here are the students and trips servicing Newburgh Public Schools locations. It breaks out as illustrated in this table. And here is the first place where I break it out into the first, second, and third tier. So let me explain what I mean by that. As I said, the single most impactful factor on the efficiency of the system are bell times. And that is because we are able to stagger the bell times and reuse each bus multiple times over the course of the day. I'm going to say this, and it sounds simple, but it's a difficult thing to achieve. You will be successful in achieving an efficient system if you're able to fill every bus trip to as much of the seating capacity on the bus as possible, and then reuse that bus as often as possible over the course of the day. Those are both factors that we need to look at as we move forward. And as you see here, the way it breaks out in terms of the number of trips and the number of riders, AM and PM, on each of the three tiers serving Newburgh schools is somewhat out of balance in terms of total number of trips and total number of students. This visual that I'm showing you now is something that we're going to focus on as we look at various alternatives. So it means that we have developed to help visualize what's going on with your transportation system. So let me take a few minutes and describe what it is you're looking at in this chart. What we do here is we calculate how many buses are actively in motion carrying students at each of the 5-minute time intervals that you see across the axis on the bottom. So what this does is allows us to visually illustrate the deployment of the fleet over the course of the day. And I hope you can see the very clear 3 different peaks in this deployment, which are illustrative of your 3-tier system as it stands today. We've also color-coded those bus trips so you can see what kind of bus trip it is that's occurring in each of these tiers. The yellow component of the service is where we have sort of lumped everything that is non-core. In other words, everything that is not serving a Newburgh school location. And when we get to some of the alternatives here in a little while, we're going to strip those runs out to provide some more clarity. But you can see very clearly the high schools and the middle schools on the first tier, your K-8 schools, and your elementary schools on tier 2 and tier 3 in the morning. And the other thing I want you to take away is you see the peak deployment illustrated on each of those tiers. 165 buses is the maximum number of buses in use before the pandemic in the morning deployment. But that is not the maximum number of buses that you need to operate the system. That's the maximum number that are actually moving and carrying students at any one time. The actual number of buses you need is higher than that because other buses are busy repositioning from one run to the next. This is the deployment in the afternoon. Same presentation, but what I want you to see here is that we can begin to see what the bell time challenges are and how they crop up primarily in the afternoon as a result of several factors. The primary factors is that you have less time available between each of the 3 tiers, and that's a direct result of not having a common length of instructional day at each school level. So even though you have an hour or more between tiers in the morning, because elementary schools and K-8 schools are shorter, those time differences compress in the afternoon and don't allow the buses as much time to complete their runs. And as a result, you can see in the colors how some of the runs start spilling over from one tier into the next. And that stacking effect you see is a direct result of that dynamic. And as a result, more buses are needed to complete the afternoon service requirement. The other thing that I'll point out is you see that long tail off to the right that stretches very deep into the evening hours. That's all of your after school requirements and the impact that that's having on the overall system demand. So before we move on to the bell time options, the last thing I wanted to show you is how this all plays out in terms of the cost of your service. You spend over $15 million a year on providing transportation services. And what I want you to take away from this slide is the impact that those low incidence services that we talked about, McKinney-Vento, foster care, special needs, non-public, are consuming collectively almost half of those resources. And even though 88% of your students are in the regular education component of service, it's only about 60% of your total cost base. The after school component and the McKinney-Vento and foster care in particular are consuming over 15% of your total transportation resources already. And we would expect that that demand is only going to increase over time. Overall, when we look at this system and we look at some of the key unit-based cost metrics, and what I mean by this is the cost per bus and the cost per student, these are very impressive results. When we look at the cost of general education at $861 per student annually, that compares very favorably with local and regional comparisons. The other thing that I will point out is that we typically see multiples of 10x and more when you compare the cost per general education student to special education student. Here, that multiple is smaller, which is an indication that you are performing the special needs service very, very cost efficiently as well. The last thing I will point out before we move on is the cost per student in the McKinney-Vento and foster care component. And you can see why that is a recurring theme and of ongoing concern in terms of the efficiency of the system. These tables are a little bit confusing to look at, but I put them in here because I need to describe one thing that's happening in the system that is unrelated to cost, unrelated to efficiency, but has a significant impact on the overall effectiveness of the system. So in our view, efficiency is all about cost. Effectiveness is all about service quality. And when we talk about service quality, we're talking about metrics such as how much time a student spends on the bus, but we're also talking about on-time arrival of buses at their programs. And that's the component that we're trying to illustrate with these tables, and trying to illustrate that there simply is not enough work time between tiers in all cases. And that's particularly true in the afternoon on tier 2, and a little bit less so on tier 3 in the morning. Many of the runs that precede those trips are long, and as a result, these trips start late and show up at school late as well. And that's something that we need to consider as we talk about bell time alternatives. So the key takeaways for the current system then. By the numbers, the current efficiency is solid. It's something that you should be very proud of. By the numbers, though, the effectiveness of the system is compromised in some ways because of the demands, the service demands in the system. Not because anybody is doing a bad job, just because some of the demands that are placed on the system are difficult to achieve in the timeframes that are allowed right now. Resolving this difference requires understanding, and this is really where this board steps in. It requires an understanding of how policy decisions play out in practice when you look at the day-to-day operations of a transportation system. To begin that, because we're going to talk a lot about policy, and we're going to pivot to that here in a moment, but I want you to understand that from our perspective, we understand that transportation is a supporting service, that the district is in the business of education, not necessarily in the business of transportation, and that educational priorities, your educational programming priorities, should absolutely not be determined by transportation considerations, but we also firmly believe that those decisions should be informed by transportation factors and transportation realities. So, and in that vein, there are certain policy priorities of this board right now, such as elementary school choice, that are challenged, logistically speaking, as a result of the desire to be able to give students the option to attend schools outside of their home area. That's one example, and we'll return to that and to some others. As a means of setting this up, then, in terms of bell time options, I want you to understand, I want this board to understand that really transportation, it's logistics, and all of logistics is an exercise in solving a constrained optimization problem. When we talk about constrained optimization, the definition there in the upper left is straight out of the book. It's the process of optimizing an objective function with respect to variables in the presence of constraints on those variables. The objective function that we're going to be looking at for the remainder of this presentation is to minimize the number of bus trips that are required. The variables, the primary one, I have it bolded here, is bell times, but that's not the only one, right? So length of the instructional day, its eligibility standards as set by this board in the context of state requirements, right? How far we allow students to walk to school, which students are allowed to get a ride, and to what locations. These are all policy decisions of this board, as are placements in special needs programs, for example, as well as other types of policies, such as what's allowable in terms of ride times for students. How many students can we put in one seat? Are we going to allow 3 high school students to sit in one seat, for example, versus 3 elementary school students? So the constraints on all of these variables that play on the ultimate solution, the majority of those constraints are policy-based decisions that emanate from this board, the superintendent, and to a lesser extent down into the transportation department. There are many other factors that affect it that really are not policy-based as well. Relative density of students in the district is a huge impactful factor that you really don't have any control over. Traffic, childcare needs, teacher schedules, vendor contracts, and how those are written and put into place. There's a host of other factors, so it's not purely a policy matter, but the job of the transportation department is to optimize the performance of the system relative to the policy decisions, and as well as these other factors. So with that, here is our take on the most impactful policy implications affecting the system right now and affecting your bell time options going forward. We've harped on the first one, the non-core programming. Everything outside of the regular home to school service is significant. Non-public requirements are mandated, right? There's nothing we can really do about that, and we have less control over incorporating non-public school bell times effectively into the system. But there are things such as the state standards, right, which I believe you are required to transport to 15 miles. I understand that the district allows that to be exceeded as far as 18 miles. That's a local decision to exceed those standards. So these are things that need to be considered in making decisions to proceed with changes. Elementary school choice is something we mentioned. The length of the instructional day, again, I understand that there are implications that go well beyond transportation in terms of teacher contracts, educational priorities, and so forth. But the difference in length of instructional day in this system is having an impact on the efficiency and effectiveness of the transportation system. And finally, you have multiple bus contractors. And this is one that is readily managed because it does appear that in the past we've allowed these multiple contractors have an influence on how we design bus trips and allocate those trips amongst the contractors. And that's something that we think should be rethought and reconsidered as well. Okay, so with that, let's switch for the remainder of our time to the bell time options that we evaluated. So The constraints and the variables. I've mentioned several times, I won't belabor the point, bell time is the single most impactful factor. But we also, in this exercise, took into consideration the possibility of achieving later school start times in two ways. The first way is simply to move that earliest school start, which is your high school and middle school start, later than the current 7 a.m. But also to see if we could focus on achieving a later secondary school start to improve educational outcomes, which, you know, is a big topic these days. You know, and the findings in terms of sleep science and so forth. So to achieve these objectives, our process is pretty straightforward. We've built a series of models, the output of which you saw in those charts. This approach allows us to model bell time changes while holding everything else constant. So if you take at face value that bell times are the most impactful factor, if we shift bell times around and keep everything else constant. So what I mean by that is, if we're changing a bell time in one of these scenarios, the bus trip itself is not being altered in this modeling. It will be the same amount of time with the same students on board, the same bus stops, the same destination. The only thing we are changing is when that bus starts the bus trip, to see what impact it can have on the total number of buses required to operate the system. We believe with this modeling approach that we have, that we get to a solid 85% solution. And what I mean by that is high confidence interval that the scenarios can be implemented and the results illustrated can be achieved. But I want to emphasize that the only way you will ever know for sure is to take it to the next step of analysis, which is to redo all of the individual bus trips in accordance with the revised bell times, looking for improvements at a much more tactical level. We didn't have the scope within this project to do that level of modeling. All right. So now I'm going to skip through a lot of the actual analytical work that we did and just refer to it real quick. So we ran a total of 9 different bell time scenarios. The first 6 are in these 2 sets that I've illustrated on this slide. The first set simply tried to achieve that later first tier start by just pushing the times a little bit later and attempting not to move the later tiers out too severely, trying to be conscious of the fact that they're already dismissing fairly late in the afternoon, and with the heavy after school service, it might make some of that untenable. That was scenario 1, 2, and 3. The second set is where we tried to flip the first and the third tier to put secondary schools on the later tier and the elementary schools first. This approach is consistent with the science regarding sleep and the need for the older students to get more sleep. It's also, as I will illustrate here shortly, a very viable approach in terms of the effectiveness and keeping the cost of your system reasonable. We had 3 initial scenarios with the bell times indicated as scenario 4, 5, and 6 on this slide. Okay. What we did then, because none of those proved to be very favorable outcomes, the key takeaways from these first scenarios is that an 8 o'clock or later first start would be very difficult to achieve. That was a goal that was set to see if we could get there, but it would be very difficult, not because we can't start the first tier at 8, but because of the domino effect and the trickle-down effect on the later tiers, and primarily the result in the afternoon in terms of how late the third tier schools would be dismissing in order to achieve that 8 o'clock start. 7:30 would be a 7:30 first start is much more likely to be palatable and achievable. But you would have to, we think, accept that you would have to add significant resources in terms of the number of buses and bus trips, unless as part of this, you're also willing to consider some changes, some other policy changes to go along with that. Okay. However, even within that, we think there are some routing strategy changes that could be completed to make this approach much more viable. One that I know that we are considering for implementation now is the combination trips to NFA. Currently, and this goes back to that comment about the contractors, currently we run separate bus trips to each of the NFA academies, even from like neighborhoods to separate schools, even though at least 2 of those campuses are very close to each other. Combining students on single bus trips and dropping at those 2 school locations in sequence could have a significant impact on the total number of buses required. Okay, so after those first 6, we decided to focus on 2 options. The one in terms of retaining the current bell time sequence with high school, middle schools first, K to 8, and then elementary. This was scenario 7, and these are the start times that we settled on and what we expected to see as outcomes. And these are the charts. And in the lower left, the small version of the chart is the current fleet deployment. The larger one in the upper right is the option that is under consideration. Okay. Here we can see that we need significantly more buses on the first tier and significantly fewer on the tier 2 and 3. It's the same pattern that you see in the current system, although the peak is higher. It's not a problem though, because the real peak occurs in the afternoon. And if I pivot to that, you can see what's going on here within the core system. You see the definite impact of the squeezing of the bell times and how that causes that second tier peak to go very high. And we think as a result, this would be a hard scenario to implement as a result of the additional resources that would be required. Just out of interest, we also ran that scenario with a policy change that equated the length of the instructional day, just to show what impact that would have on the total number of buses required. So if I go back, you can see the peak without a length of day equality is 178 on the second tier, and that goes all the way down to 158 if we are able to have a common length of instructional day. Not suggesting you do that, I just wanted to make sure we illustrated that for you. Okay, the last scenario that we really analyzed was a scenario that again flipped the secondary schools into the third tier and put them at the start times that you see illustrated here. And the expectations in terms of this scenario toward the bottom. And it did play out almost exactly that way. So what's interesting about this scenario, if I actually jump ahead to the afternoon, you can see that the afternoon deployment is only marginally higher than your current deployment, even though we've squeezed the start times together somewhat. And that's a direct result of having the longer day schools on the third tier, so that those longer school day schools don't have a negative impact on the other schools. It's the other way around. So this to us was a very, very viable scenario for you to consider with the flip and as well as the 30-minute later first start on the first tier, although that would be the elementary schools instead of the high schools. Okay. Well, as it turns out, we presented this to the superintendent and staff back in July. And you had, as an organization, you had many things on your mind in addition to the work that we were doing. And you were mostly focused on getting school started. These are the key takeaways that we had from these 2 options. But as I understand, we have not chosen to pursue either of those, and instead chose to keep the same sequence of schools with an hour separation between the tiers for the next school year. So we went ahead just as a last step and modeled that scenario for you as well. This is what the morning will look like under that scenario. And this is what the afternoon will look like under that scenario. The peak deployment in the afternoon is marginally higher than in the current system. But here I will return to the limitations of the modeling that we did, in that this does not take into account any modifications to individual bus trips themselves. And we are highly confident that things such as combining the NFA bus trips and some other judicious changes to tactical routing options will easily make this a cost neutral option going forward. You may be able to save some buses as well, but I'm not prepared to go as far as saying that it will definitely yield some savings. So with that, I'm going to end just returning to this notion of constrained optimization. And the reason I want to return to this in this setting is to emphasize once again that what you get in transportation is the result of a lot of decisions and a lot of analysis that is done, but all of that analysis is done in the context of the policy decisions that begin with this board. So I hope that this presentation will help you understand the role that you have to play in making the transportation system efficient and effective. It's a great system. It's operating efficiently today. And with some belt time changes, I'm confident it can operate efficiently and more efficiently and effective going forward. So
Thank you,
with
Mr.
that, I will stop and see if there's any questions.
Board members, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. I don't see any hands.
Again, thank you, Mr. Platt. We appreciate the work that you did for us. And what I'll share at this point, just because we are gearing up to kick off our next budget cycle, is that these are the kinds of things that we'll need to grapple with as we think of efficiencies and effectiveness for the upcoming school year. I know we're only in October, but yes, we have to plan for 2022.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is, and I'll leave you with that one thought that right now is the time to start considering detailed planning for the start of school year next year, if there's going to be some significant bell time changes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good evening.
Yep, you too. Thank you.
All right, bye.
All right, Madam President, I'm going to move up 2.5 just because these are presentations by two of our school leaders. And so this is the presentation from South Middle and Vales Gate STEAM Academy on their SEPs. So because I can't see you, I'm just going to ask that Ms. Brooks, if you are ready to go.
I'm ready to go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Mr. McCoy, are you going to?
Mr. Durante's going to pull up your presentation, Ms. Brooks. Just give us 1 second.
Great, thank you.
Is it the Vales
Go
Gate?
south, south.
Okay, good evening, Madam President, board members, senior office, guests, and staff and faculty. Today I'm here to present South Middle School 2020-2021 School Comprehensive Educational Plan. I'm going to present an overview of what we will be working on for this school year. I just want to start off by saying this was some heartfelt work that happened over the summer, and it is very rewarding, very honest, very clean, hard work. I'm really excited about what we came out at the end result. I'm excited about the relationships we formed while we were doing it. So it's a great piece of work. We got a lot of work to do, but it's really outlined to kind of explain where we're starting from. And it's really transparent to see where we are right now. So the 5 areas of focus for South Middle School this year is positive interactions between students, staff, and faculty, instructional feedback to students, social emotional learning and wellness, and parent communication and respect for all. Next slide, please. So goal number 1 is to reduce the chronic absenteeism rate. So our current state and our root cause was discovered after a numerous attempts of questioning why, and we dug really deep, and it's positive interaction. So our root cause is the school has not implemented expectations how students and adults are to interact. That's the first root cause. Second is teachers have not been given the tools to provide empathy to improve relationships and positively impact attendance. And the third root cause is there is no clear protocol or modeling of positive communications and how this occurs between staff and students, which impacts students' desire to come to school. So with those root causes in place, by June, our anticipated state is that South Middle School will have prioritized tone, empathy, positive communication, resulting in a reduced chronic absenteeism rate of 18%, which equals to about 20 students, which is just not our focus, but that's our goal, or less. The second goal is feedback to students. The current state and root cause, number 1, is the school has not implemented expectations for providing feedback to students. The root cause number 2 is the school has not implemented a system to provide students with feedback on how to improve their work. And the third root cause is administration has not focused on how to best provide effective feedback to teachers after walkthroughs. So by June, the anticipated state is at 75%, which equals out to 57 out of 76 teachers of SMS teachers will regularly provide students clear and concise feedback to improve their work as evidenced by walkthrough data. The third goal is social emotional learning and wellness. The school has not implemented a multi-year approach to planning professional development and monitoring of social emotional learning practices. The school has not implemented a system that lays out shared responsibilities and expectations amongst all stakeholders about social emotional learning for students. With these root causes, by June, the anticipated state is that SMS will have implemented 10 units of Rethink Ed and consistently use brain power wellness, resulting in a reduction in referral rates by 10%, which equals out to 142 referrals or less per month. The fourth goal is parent communication. The current state is the school has not implemented a system by which to create positive interactions with staff and parents. The school has not provided differentiated resources for our diverse families to become active participants in the school community at large. And the school has not created a system of communication with parents to monitor and to enhance communication. By June, South Middle School improved communications as evidenced by 75% of parents agreeing they are satisfied with how well the school communicates with them on a parent survey. And goal number 5 is respect for all. Our current state, there's a lack of professional development and consistent expectations provided to staff on how to develop these equitable practices in order for students to feel that everyone is treated fairly, regardless of race, culture, language, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or special needs. By June, South Middle School, 53.5%, which equals out to 490 students of the students at South Middle School agree or strongly agree to the survey question that they are treated fairly, regardless of the race, culture, language, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or special needs. Thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to providing progress notes. We are on our way to a very successful year. We have done some of the PD work and we have done a couple of trainings already. So we're making progress by the minute.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks, and thank you to your SLT.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Padilla, do you want me to ask for questions on now,
Yes,
or do you
ma'am.
want me to wait until after Vale's Gate goes?
No, we could do it now if there are any questions.
Board members, any questions? I have a comment. I think you're very brave. I think your school, your SLT is very brave in showing us all the challenges that you face and all the positive things that you're thinking about doing. My wish was that we were really going to focus on academics and instruction, curriculum and instruction, and I only see a teeny bit of that. So I'm hoping that this is going to give you a good foothold. And then next year, we see a big, giant push on instruction and curriculum, because I think that's where we need to go. We've been focusing very long on the touchy-feely. Now we really need to move forward on the academics. Wow, I see 3 hands. Go ahead, Mr. Forget.
Ms. Brooks, can you expand upon the feedback? Because I think that's where a lot of the instruction's really going to come about. There was a lot of conversation with the SLT on that. Just expand on that feedback focus.
Okay, so the feedback focus results in from students not receiving full, complete feedback. With they are not given the opportunity to get steps and tools to provide to improve their academics. So feedback was not consistently provided to students and still is not, as well as the feedback provided to the teachers on how to provide feedback. So we're going to focus on our walkthrough data is going to show exactly how feedback and different options could be provided to students. And we're going to take a baseline data of the instruction, what the student is doing. Then we're going to follow along with the student to find out how the feedback was provided to them and how effective this was to see if there was a growth in academics during that way. That's the first steps. It's more importantly to understand that when we're providing feedback as a school building, if there is none and there's a grade, there's students that's missing. What are the next steps? What did I didn't do wrong? What did I do right? So there are some things that that has to be taught in order for us to really have a baseline data of how effective our feedback is. And a part of it is administration providing feedback to the teachers on how to conduct that in several different ways.
Thank you. Mr. Levinstein, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks, could you put up the parent communication slide that you have on this?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McCoy, can you put that up?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I think
No,
we
it's
went
down. It's one down. Yes.
No, not this one. The one with the I think it's important that this one here for parent participation and involvement and communication. I think it's very important. And one of the goals is to improve communication, as evidenced by 75% of parents agreeing that they're satisfied. So my question really is it 75% of the parents that respond to this survey that are satisfied, or is your expectation that 75% of the total parents of the building that are satisfied? Because I would love to see 100% of the parents, have this conversation with you, but I'm not sure if that is truly realistic.
Yes, Mr. Levinstein, I would truly love for 100% of our parents to participate in our surveys and parent community involvement events. However, this will be 75% of the parents that are participating. So we'll start with a baseline of parent participation in our events and communication. We have originated a parent hub that is provided to parents to kind of interactive, where they can get in communication in different languages as well as different modes and modalities. So at this point, we're just looking for the 75% of parents, which we're trying to engage to have a great communication experience with the school. A lot of our parents we have provided differentiated resources. However, they are not provided to the skill as well as we are working with parent education in order to help them be able to communicate with us more effectively as well. So it will be the majority of the parents and their feelings about how they are communicating and how we are communicating with them.
So Mr. Levinstein, this is one of the requirements from the state that it's a survey goal. Each of the CSI schools were required to write certain goals. This was one selected for a consistent survey that is done. So this is in response to which part of the survey are we going to really focus on. But I think based on your comment, Ms. Brooks in the SLT will work to ensure that we get increased participation in the actual surveys so that we get a better rating on a larger population of the staff, of the parents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Brooks, first I just want to congratulate you on such an honest, bold, and a very concise plan here. And I just got to say, I just hope that, you know, we understand and as a board and as a district, there's going to be baby steps, and gradual improvement is what we'll be looking for. But I just got to say, it's very honest. It's almost like a look in the mirror type of analysis, and it takes a very boldness to actually come up with a set plan like this and being honest. And I want to commend you for that and your building team. And I just want to say, at any point in time when you feel you need resources or the resources aren't there, speak up, speak out. Squeaky wheel, get the oil. Good luck, congratulations, and I just want to say, go backs.
Thank you.
Dr. Padilla, let's move on to Vales Gate, please.
Got it. Ms. Syria Briscoe Perez is up next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Madam President, Dr. Padilla, members of Senior Cabinet, and guests that are watching us tonight. We're very excited that we can share a little bit of what's happening in our school buildings. Shantae, awesome job. I love awesome job. And I will try to walk you through our STEP plan. The implementation of our STEP would not be possible with the assistance, without the assistance of our assistant principal, Ms. Cruz, and our instructional coach, Allison Roberts. These two ladies working together with me and with the SLT. We have worked very hard in coming up with a plan that will be seamless and that would be doable. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to share with you tonight. I also want to say that none of the plans that are within the SEP plan would be possible without the commitment of our faculty and staff to the work that we're doing at Vales Gate. So I want to celebrate them also for the work that they are doing right along with us at our school. So we have 5 focus areas for our plan: meaningful feedback, targeted planning, consistent instructional practices, a focus on attendance, and a focus on student respect as based on our survey. All right. The goal of our STEP, before I walk you through some of our through the rest of the slide, is really to demonstrate growth in each one of these areas by implementing a couple of things at Vales Gate. We want to focus on best practices, and you will hear a little bit about that during the presentation. We want to make sure that we're providing feedback to our faculty members. We want to closely monitor instruction and growth through walkthroughs and through reviews of lesson plans. We also want to support our students with their attendance, ensuring that they're coming to school every day and that when they get to us, they're ready for learning. And we also want to continue implementation of our social emotional program, which is Ruler. So our first goal here is meaningful and actionable feedback. So our root cause revealed that we were providing feedback to teachers, but we were focusing mostly on explicit instruction, which is one of the best practices that we're focusing on, but not so much on reciprocal teaching. So by the end of the school year, we want to ensure that 90% of the feedback that is given to teachers is reflective of implementation of both practices, explicit instruction, and reciprocal teaching. Next goal, please. Thank you. The second goal is targeted planning strategies, and root cause revealed that many teachers were still in the development, still developing a comfort level and skills related to planning with explicit instruction and reciprocal teaching strategies. We're going to be supporting teachers through very focused professional development activities throughout the school year. And therefore, by June, we would like 80% of lesson plans to include strategies for both reciprocal teaching and explicit instruction. The next goal is consistent instructional strategies. Our root cause revealed that full implementation with fidelity to all aspects of reciprocal teaching and explicit instruction were not consistent school-wide. And by June, we are expecting that with an increase in reciprocal teaching and explicit instruction strategies, there will be an increase in both ELA and math assessments as measured by iReady. So our goal is really to empower teachers to consistently implement these best practices. And we know, because research shows that if our students are fully using these two practices, that they will demonstrate growth in ELA and math. Our next goal is focusing on attendance. So our root cause revealed that the school has not been able to fully convey the importance of regular attendance to all families, as positive attendance has not been fully realized by all students. So although we have tried multiple ways to engage families in conversations regarding attendance, we are still not satisfied with the number of students that are coming to school every day on a regular basis. Therefore, we're going to continue that work. And we want to decrease our chronic absenteeism rate to 14.8 or lower. And our next goal is for students to ensure that all students are treating each other respectfully. So our root cause revealed that students do not regularly pause and think before they act, which leads to situations lacking in respect to others. So although we have been providing training and implementation of Ruler, which is our SEL program, we still have work to do to ensure that the students are treating each other with respect. So by the end of the school year, Ruler training and implementation, whether remote or in person, will have provided students with more tools for their toolbox in order to better regulate their behavior and to take more respectful actions with others. So I want to say that the implementation of this SEP will require just very focused work. We have decided to focus on mainly two instructional areas. I would say mainly two best practices, explicit instruction and reciprocal teaching. These practices are proven by research, and they prove that if we engage students in rigorous instruction, that they will demonstrate academic growth, and also that we will raise the level of student engagement. So I'm really very excited about this work. I want to thank you for your interest in it, and I also want to thank you for your support with it.
Board members, questions for Mrs. Briscoe Perez? Thank you, thank you. I see a lot of teaching and learning in your plan. I thank you. I really thank you for that. Thanks. Nice job.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Dr. Padilla.
Yeah, Ms. Briscoe Perez, thank you to yourself, your Ms. Cruz, the school leadership team, and the faculty and staff. We're looking forward to looking at the outcomes of these plans.
Wonderful.
Right, so
thank you.
To both Ms. Brooks and Ms. Briscoe Perez, have a great evening. Thank you for tonight's presentations, and we'll be in touch real soon. All right, I'm gonna keep moving forward to 2.4. Mr. Ramjug and Clark Patterson Lee will give us a quick presentation update on the capital project.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. With the NFA swimming pool renovation well underway, planning and design has continued at an optimum pace with the new CTE building, Heritage Middle School, New Windsor Elementary School, as well as Vale Skate STEAM Academy. Of those,
Heritage Middle School continues to be a pressing priority given the need to reduce the scheduled number of lunch periods in the cafeteria in order to accommodate all of the students in the building. This evening, Mr. Colby and Mr. Hart, both from Clark Patterson Lee, will present on the interior finishes of the cafeteria, as well as the design of the indoor air quality and air conditioning systems that are planned for Heritage. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Ramjug. Thank you, Dr. Padilla, members of the board. Great to see everybody again. So as Mr. Ramjug mentioned, we're going to do a brief presentation on where we're at on Heritage. This is the second of the projects that will be submitted to SED later this year. So by the end of December, we're actually tracking about 2 weeks ahead of schedule on our submission. This was supposed to be in early January sent to SED. And we're on track to have this sent to SED in December, actually just before Christmas. So things are actually moving along pretty quickly here. The rendering you see before you this evening, you've seen before. So it's just a quick refresher here in the beginning on the exterior and the floor plan here in a minute. Here's our timeline of where we've been up to this point. So user group meetings, also in that group or that category would be educational planning. So these are the meetings where we're getting together with everybody in the building that has feedback, that needs to give us feedback and has an important stake in providing us with information on not only the cafeteria, but the other components of the building. And Mr. Hart from my office here in a second we'll talk about the air quality portion of the project. But as you can see, we've had multiple site visits, multiple educational planning sessions, and mechanical systems meetings. And this is just for Heritage. At the same time, we have the same thing going on for CTE, Vales Gate, and New Windsor. And that's in addition to our weekly meetings that we have every Monday for the capital project, myself, Mr. Ramjug, Mr. Rodriguez from the Palumbo Group, and all the other team members that are involved in the project. So real quick, this is, again, probably review for most of you. The yellow, I just want to get you acclimated to what we're about to see, some renderings here so you can understand what you're looking at. The yellow is the proposed addition. And then the blue area is going to be the gut renovation of the existing cafeteria. The furniture that you see there is a placeholder for now. In fact, today the district has engaged with the furniture consultant that's going to be working on the project. So moving forward, this furniture layout will change slightly, but our team provided this furniture layout to confirm and make sure that we had the appropriate seating count. As many of you know, in this building, you're dealing with multiple lunch sessions, and we wanted to get it down to one lunch session per grade level. So this layout in this addition is going to achieve that. That was a critical part of this addition and really the driving force behind it. So some of the stuff you see on here will change. We've already received feedback as late as last Thursday from the ed planning sessions that they want to change a few things here in terms of seating. But again, those selections will happen as we move forward in the next several meetings with that group. So at the last ed planning session, we looked at, this was our second go around with interior finishes. We had several meetings looking at different palettes, different concepts, different ideas. This was one of two options that was presented in terms of floor coverings, paint colors, ceiling colors, etc. And so this was the option that was selected by the group. What you see on the left-hand side is the floor plan that shows the floor tile pattern that's going to be used that was selected by the group. And then on the top, you can see the paint palette. We're using colors that reflect the school colors of the district, and then some other wall covering, wall protection options that we have that Actually, very, very nice. So this is a very exciting part of the project. It's not as exciting as having a shovel in the ground, but we're starting to see things come to life, and everybody loves this part of the planning process. Next slide, please. So what we've done here, this slide and the next slide, you're going to see things kind of muted, but we're highlighting the components that were selected. So for example, the floor tile here, some of the paint on the ceiling, which is an accent to the soffit, and those round circular components that you see are the clouds. So they help dampen some of the noise. The blue circles are the clouds that help dampen the noise. The white circles that you see off to the left are some of the lighting that was chosen. And then we have some different ceiling levels that have lighting hidden in between them as well. And again, the furniture here is just a placeholder at this point. This is looking out towards the new addition. So the glass that you see at the far end of this rendering is the new addition, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at. This is looking back at the existing cafeteria. So this is standing in the new addition. You can see some of the windows off to the right. And again, we're looking at some of the colors that were selected for paint, some of the wall graphics, paint colors and wall covering. Just below, we have a wainscoting or a half wall height covering that helps protect that wall, and it takes quite a bit of abuse. And then you can see up on the ceiling, we have different levels of soffits and clouds. Again, that helps deflect a lot of the noise that you typically get in the cafeteria to keep it from being too loud and uncomfortable. So when you put all that together and we get into a real live rendering, this is what the cafeteria will look like. This is looking specifically at the addition. So you can see the colors that were chosen for the clouds in the ceiling, some of the lighting, paint colors, floor coverings, the window glazing. Again, the furniture is a placeholder for now. And we'll, as we move forward, we'll update this as we engage with those at the stakeholders at the building and with the furniture consultant. So up next, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hart. Mr. Hart is our lead mechanical engineer for the team. He's going to run through some of the benefits of what we have worked out in terms of the mechanical system that's going into Heritage, how that'll impact the environmental controls and interior to the building. And then once he's done, I'll wrap up next steps and some schedule items for you.
All right, thank you, Chris, Roger, and the board. As you know, a major portion of the scope of this capital project is to replace and provide new HVAC systems to all of your school buildings. Very significant challenge, obviously. Heritage, again, this discussion is going to be based on Heritage alone. The existing system at Heritage is these wall-mounted unit ventilators with some packaged rooftop units that serve. The packaged rooftop units serve most of the common and interior spaces. You can flip to the next slide. The HVAC selection criteria consisted of installed cost, operating costs, building limitations, and other project requirements. And these parameters were applied to all of the district buildings, but different building characteristics lead to different differences in recommended systems. So each building is unique. We didn't go through a cookie cutter selection process to determine the systems. We looked at specifically budget, cost, limitations of the physical constraints of the building. This graphic, you can back up, Chris, just real quick. The graphic here kind of represents the system design. To the left are some typical classrooms going to be served by horizontal unit ventilators, and I'll get into that selection in a minute. And then the common spaces will be served by packaged rooftop equipment. Now, packaged rooftop equipment is good when you're serving high occupancy spaces or interior spaces to the building that require ducted ventilation airflow. You can flip, Chris. These are some system graphics that kind of describe a couple of different system types we're looking at. The ventilation system will consist of new energy recovery units to provide consistent ventilation airflow rates while providing energy transfer from the exhaust air to the ventilation air. And that graphic can be seen in the lower left-hand corner of the slide. And then the constant ventilation airflow rates will be delivered to each classroom by a ducted and balanced fan system. So it won't be any type of barometric system providing ventilation. It'll be quantifiable, measurable, and able to be controlled. And then all new HVAC equipment will have MERV 13 filters per CDC and SED recommendations. The horizontal unit ventilators will be installed above the ceilings and operate at a low fan speed in order to minimize sound transfer to the classroom spaces. And then we'll also implement some COVID-related guidelines in terms of ventilation purge cycles for pre and post occupancy of the spaces. That will allow fresh air to flush out the rooms before and after occupancy, and then maintain a constant airflow rate during the classroom occupancy. And some of the benefits of this system is, we will have a chiller to produce chilled water, which will be pumped and piped to all the building HVAC components. But all of the major mechanical equipment is outside of the classrooms. Compressors, everything else is all separate from classrooms to minimize noise transfer and disruption to students. And then all HVAC systems will be controlled by a direct digital control building management system for optimum system control and monitoring. And then we are coordinating this work with your existing and current JCI energy performance contract, knowing that there is a lot of integration between the two, will be a lot of integration between the two construction contracts.
So real quick, next steps. As I mentioned before, we're on track to get the SED just before Christmas, which is about 2 weeks ahead of schedule in terms of our submission SED. Between now and then, we're going to be working on our construction documents, specifications, all the very finer detail stuff that SED needs to see to give us a building permit, but also the items that contractors need to see. So there's a big push from us over the next 2 months to hit that target, which is good if we can get it out before the holidays. Some other good news with this is SED's review time has dropped significantly since we've started this project in the design phase. So we're anticipating if we get this to SED just before Christmas, they have a 2-month review period. That 2-month review period puts us, say, at the beginning of March. There's a little bit of back and forth typically with comments, questions, and any information that SED might need that's supplemental to the drawings. So that puts us in a really good place, or somewhere around April, give or take, for bidding. Our original bid target was July. So we're going to be a few months ahead as long as things don't change at SED. We're looking at being out to bid in early to mid spring, which is really good. It's a good bidding environment. It's much better than July. So right now, things are looking really great on Heritage, and we're anticipating having a shovel in the ground sooner rather than later.
Board members, any questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you as well. And we want to continue to see these projects moving along. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to move forward with the last item on my section of the agenda, and that's an update for Operation Reopen. So I'm just going to present my screen. Okay, so tonight, my team and I have another update regarding Operation Reopen, and this is an opportunity to share with the board and community some of the recent happenings and what's up ahead. And very specifically, these are the 5 areas for this evening. As I mentioned back in September, we sent out a survey because we wanted to know. As I continue to say, this is all new and there's a lot of learning taking place. But we wanted to hear from families as to how this new environment how it's going for them and their children. So specifically if they are 100% remote and either hybrid, experiencing synchronous and asynchronous instruction. So you can see here the scale goes from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. And it's good to see that the majority of our families are very satisfied. And I attribute that to 100% to our teachers and our administrators. You can see the numbers between areas 4 and 5. So when you look at hybrid learning, 42% plus the 38.5%. For asynchronous, it's 21.8% plus 31.9%. And then lastly, synchronous instruction, 25.3% and 33%. So I know I talk to teachers regularly. I talk to administrators regularly. They are, outreaching to families, trying to, support them as we work through some of our challenges. So as I will also continue to say, we have a lot of work to do. And although this is new and we're certainly putting forward our best effort, we still hear every week of students that are very much struggling. And so we need to attend to those needs and make sure that we are a responsive organization. I just want to take a quick minute to make clear the distinction between when someone is quarantined versus when someone is in isolation. So isolation is an individual who has tested positive for COVID, and they're at risk of spreading COVID to other people. These are individuals who, by accordance to CDC and the Department of Health, need to be alone, and they need to be alone for a period of time so they can get better and not spread the virus to other people. Quarantine is a potential situation where someone came in contact, believed to have come in contact with someone who tested positive, although they are not symptomatic. They still need to take the precaution and be safe and quarantine themselves for a period of time, just in case. So those are the two distinguishing features between someone who is in isolation and someone who is in quarantine. Just a quick update, as this is something that's been discussed several times at board meetings. I just want to give a shout out to our entire buildings and grounds team, to Mr. Velez, to Dr. Spindler for their due diligence in making sure that we are one of a few districts that have in fact installed the MERV 13 filters. And as of today, really as of last week, all MERV 13 filters have been installed. I want to talk a little bit about the process of closing a school, if that's what's needed, as it relates to the new metrics that has been established by the New York State Department of Health, specifically the governor's office. So I know a lot of our community members are trying to be informed. We just want to take a moment to distinguish two very different sets of colors that have resulted in a number of phone calls to my office asking for clarity. The New York State Department of Health has a set of colors that is different from the Orange County Department of Health with a different set of colors. What's important here is, based on this new metrics for determining who becomes in a particular zone, it is a 7-day rolling average over 10 days of over 3%. So if you can understand what that means, we're still trying to understand what that means in all fairness, because that information isn't as available as we would like it to. But I will say this, and this is a real credit to to various key people in our district that meet every single day consistently to monitor the district's data around positive cases and those who are in isolation and those who need to quarantine. Now, in a previous board meeting, there was some discussion around particular numbers. And tonight we are sharing them. We have communicated with the Department of Health and are going to make sure that we don't reveal personal identifiable information. But it is important to communicate where we're at. And I will say that we get a consistent report every day for all of the positive cases for adults and students across the entire county. As you know, we have started phase 3. So we are completely hybrid at this point for grades pre-K through 5, grades 6, 7, and grades 9, 10. We will continue to closely monitor daily data, as well as that data that I indicated a minute ago, as it go, that 7-day rolling average over 10 days. We're in communication with the Department of Health, sometimes daily, absolutely multiple times every week, as they are the key players in determining when there's a positive case and when there is not. Next week, I just want to make it very clear to everyone what's occurring as it relates to the calendar. So this is a reminder, and we will send out more information. But next Tuesday, given that many of our schools are polling sites, we still need to prioritize safety, not just in the sense of COVID health and safety, but safety in the sense of the magnitude of people that will be in and out of our buildings in normal cases while children and adults are there. So we are going to allow for everyone to be remote. And I have to be careful because although we would like it to be everyone, there are adults and departments that still have to physically come in for a number of valid reasons. But the instruction that will be delivered on Tuesday is synchronous. So that is synchronous live instruction. Wednesdays will continue to be asynchronous instruction. And so as you can see, Wednesday, November 4th will be an asynchronous day. And we're going on our 4th Wednesday where that's the case. And we have gotten overwhelmingly positive feedback that the asynchronous Wednesday, people are really maximizing them and getting a lot out of them. So again, Tuesday the 3rd, all remote with an asterisk. That is synchronous live instruction. And then next Wednesday, the 4th, will continue to be a asynchronous day. And let's all continue to mask up. Every time we come, make sure we're 6 feet apart, our masks are on. Every time we leave the house, grab your phone, your wallet, your purse, your keys, and your mask. Madam President, that concludes this presentation.
Board members, any questions or comments? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. At the last board meeting, there was a situation that was brought up regarding Heritage Middle School and a large number of students in the gym. Could you let the board know what steps your administration took to address that situation, and where do we stand right now with those students that have teachers that are quarantined?
Yeah, Mr. Forget, you want to start?
Sure. With regards to the number of teachers that are quarantined, Dr. Padilla, can you go back to that slide, please?
Yeah, I just got to represent my screen. Give me a second.
So, Mr. Stridiron, we'll give you what we're calling moment in time data. So each Friday, we take a look at the data for the number of teachers, the number of staff and faculty, which includes administrators, and the number of students that are both quarantined and those that are positive. So on Friday, October 16th, on that day, when we added up all the individuals in the building in the district, we had 35 teachers on Friday, October 16th that were quarantined across our district. We had 4 staff and administrators that were quarantined in our district on Friday, October 16th. And then we had 33 students on Friday, October 16th that were quarantined. And then actual positive cases, there were 2 teachers across the district on October 16th that were positive. There were 0 staff and admin, staff being, your buildings and grounds, your custodial, your security, everyone not teachers basically, and administrators. And then students, there were 6 positive cases. Go forward 1 week on Friday, October 23rd, there were 19 teachers that were quarantined. There were 3 staff and administrators that were quarantined and 11 students. So I don't have to read the chart to you, but that's the reduction in the number over a week's period of time. What steps are we taking? We are trying to coordinate a variety of individuals that can cover classes. We are ramping up to ensure that substitutes are prepared and ready to teach. We are now offering the opportunity for teachers that are asymptomatic and quarantined to provide instruction from home during the quarantine. But that doesn't mean that we can leave the in-person students unattended. We still have to have an adult in that classroom, so that although it's the right thing to do for the students to have continuity of instruction, it still presents an issue with having to have another adult in the classroom to oversee and just monitor the students, not deliver the instruction, but monitor the students. We're looking at a variety of different strategies to do that. As far as the individuals that were in Heritage on that day, that caught us off guard, and that's something that can't happen. We had to respond, and we did not have substitutes to cover all of those particular teachers. We were unable to get them. We have not had that situation since that initial moment in time. But just to be very direct, we just didn't have enough subs, Mr. Stridiron, to cover it. And we did the best that we could by separating and trying the best that we possibly could. But it has not happened since then, that I'm aware of. Mr. Bear, anything?
No, I'm not aware of anything else. And after you set this up the first day, the continuity of learning continued. At this point, I did talk to Ms. Brunger, and all the staff are back, as you know. So we've not had a repeat since then. Can I also say we do ask and we monitor from ahead of time with all the principals to give us any information. Sorry, something just happened on my screen, to make sure that we're ahead of this. So, I'm on call all the time in case there's a concern, so we can set things up the night before if necessary.
Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand again.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for that answer. It's very concise and very informative. I have another question on the form that's filled out by, it's supposed to be filled out at home by the parents before they send the students to school. That's a health questionnaire. Apparently, there are students showing up to the school that haven't had that form filled out, and they're having them filling them out in the school. But part of the questioning is if they don't meet the requirements, if there's some kind of a question that they answer that says that they've had a fever in the last 24 hours or something like that, they're not supposed to be in the school to begin with. But if they're answering the question in the school, they've possibly contaminated the students that they're sitting with and the staff. So why are we allowing students to come to the school and get in the buildings if they haven't filled out that questionnaire at home?
Well, Mr. Stridiron, I'll let Dr. Roman speak to this, but the students are not completing that questionnaire on a daily basis. That's done on a regular basis. The faculty and staff have to complete that form on a daily basis. However, temperature screenings are being done on a daily basis. Dr. Roman, can you shed some more light on that?
Sure, just to echo what you shared, in the SED guidance that was provided. It requires school districts to collect that information periodically. And so we've selected one day in the district to be able to request that information. There may be times where we have to do some follow-up with specific students. However, as Mr. Forja had mentioned, every student has to get their temperature checked on a daily basis, and they have to make sure that happens at the school level. So that's something that we are continuing to work on. We have some multiple strategies to continue to inform families about the importance of this. Several robocalls have been sent out to remind families of this, the need, for this survey to be completed.
And I know we've discussed this multiple times already, but there will be times when a child will fill out the survey in person at school. So as much as we are encouraging and asking families to do it at home, this is why we have the paper copies available. So that way, when a child doesn't come with it already done or hasn't completed the digital version, that there's a hard copy there ready to go. And if they do answer yes, then they would have to go into the isolation room. So, I mean, there are protocols in place for, in the event someone answers a yes to any of those questions, they have to be analyzed by the nurse. So it is likely that there will be some kids who do come in person and have to complete a paper copy.
Board members, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Padilla.
Yep, Madam President, that concludes my items. I know it was a little lengthy tonight with several presentations, so I appreciate everyone's participation.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our public comments on agenda items. We do have one. Mr. McCoy, would you please read that for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam President, we have one public comment. This comment came from Matthew Scully. Subject was robocalls. I think it would be professional to let staff know about the return of students without it coming through as a robocall for all families. Thank you, Matt. That's the only public comment received, Madam President.
Thank you. We're going to have a Mineo minute now. So please, everybody, take a moment, stretch, do what you got to do, and then come right back. Mr. McCoy, let me know when most everyone is back.
You're all set, ma'am. There's a quorum in the room. We're ready to start whenever you are, Madam President.
Thank you. We're going to move on to my section. I have one item for your discussion tonight. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? I'd like to call on Mr. Forget to help us understand this change.
Thank you, Madam President. As we navigate through the attendance taking of both virtual and in person, it's come up to our attention that there's extended time that's required to reconcile the attendance data. And there was also a request for consideration of students who turn in assignments late, and teachers would like the opportunity to provide the students with some form of credit for it during an assignment on an asynchronous day. They wanted the opportunity to do that. So because of the time that it takes to verify the attendance, Ms. Peterson and I had some conversations, and we would just like to suspend the component of the time that we mandated for them to reconcile the attendance. We just want to expand it. The other thing that we're finding is where we've got greater communication between parents and the schools with regards to attendance. So parents are taking a very, very positive approach with making sure that the students are engaged and that they're accurately being recorded for attendance. And as they're doing that, they're bringing to the attention of the office staff and the school leadership that there may be some errors, and after verification and ensuring that it's accurate, we need the opportunity to fix that in the system. So we're asking for an extent, just a pause on this particular portion of the agenda of the policy. And then once we're back to 100% in person, we will revert back to the standards that we had.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forget. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Stradone.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand that about the time frame, because that'll help with the crunch of changes that need to be made. My question is, I'm kind of confused as to what qualifies as being attending for the day. When you have a student that logs on and is on for 5 minutes and then logs off, is that considered attending for the whole day? Or how do you differentiate that between if it's a synchronous day or asynchronous day? Can someone explain that?
Yeah, Ms. Mineo, would it be appropriate to ask Ms. Peterson to chime in at this point?
Sure. Ms. Peterson?
So for attendance, we've been having in-depth conversations with administration and teachers around student participation, grading, and what is attendance and how to mark that appropriately. For the majority of students, the question that you raised is the question that is most prevalent in terms of if I have a student engaging or not engaging, in instruction, how can we count that as participating? And what we've been stating to them is, we really want to see students engaged, and we understand how frustrating that is when they are not engaged in virtual instruction. However, if they were in person and they were not engaged in instruction, we would never mark them absent. So we've been trying to work with student support services and to try to get the communication out to parents as to how students can be engaged. Also, if a student logs in and logs off, but then completes an assignment, that also counts as participation. So we've been problem solving. This is all new territory for administration, for teachers, and we're really trying to work through it. One thing that I have to say is that I'm thankful that parents have been on our portal looking at attendance in a new way this year and have been giving us feedback just to improve our process.
Do we know what the chronic absentee rate is at each school? And if it's possible, can the board see that?
So we do monitor attendance daily. Currently, I'm working on a report for you with our virtual versus in-person versus hybrid learning for you to review.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Secondary, who's sitting in for elementary, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Curriculum Instruction Elementary has 2 items for on the consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Good evening, Madam President. This evening, under the Student Support Services agenda, we have 6.1 recommendations from CSE CPSE for your consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
That concludes my items. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roman. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. I present to you items 7.1 through 7.2 as a consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion on any of these items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.8 for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I see Mr. Stridiron, you have your hand up.
Yes, 8.2, please.
Anyone else like to separate out anything else? Okay, let's talk about 8.1 through 8.8 without 8.2. I'd like to entertain, I'd like to entertain a motion. Sorry, I'm losing it.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call on those items, please.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes?
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Let's go back to item 8.2. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
Moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to our clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Good evening, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from October 13th, 2020.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We have no items for the from the public comment for non-agenda items. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.